Okay. 1.3 Introduction to Experimental Design. This is kind of the last, well, it is the last section of the chapter, and it's a good way to kind of introduce or to lead into what we're doing later on within the class. We're basically here, we're going to discuss the census, describe simulations, observational studies, experiments, identify control groups, and discuss potential pitfalls in data. It's really the big like this is what a statistical or statistician or medical, maybe pharmaceutical, whatever type of study would look at. So the guidelines for planning a statistical study, they're found on page 23 in your book if you want to take a peek at that. This is kind of like like I said, what a pharmaceutical study would do it used to be called Prax, and I think it's called Cetero now, where they would kind of give a generic brand of a generic version of a drug to a person and eventually get it FDA approved. But I'm going to think of this as a teacher. If I were to identify the individuals or objects of interest, maybe that is maybe juniors at Cheyenne High School. The specific variable I'm looking at is going to be my ACT scores. I'm going to determine whether or not I'm using an entire population, which probably isn't going to happen, and I'm going to have to pick my sampling methods. So this might be, hey, I'm going to go through and do like stratified, or I'm going to go through and do convenience, or what kind of a sampling method am I going to do? Determine the collection plan, addressing any privacy, ethics, or confidentiality needs. Maybe within ACT scores, how do I go about getting those scores? Do I ask somebody? So maybe they're not willing to give me a truthful answer. Maybe privacy is something to deal with, or confidentiality. Ethics, did I put out a fair fight to get like a good general random sample, or did I just pick the most easy things? Collect my data, go out and collect my data. And then this is here where we're talking about more of like the next couple of chapters, or maybe the next semester even, or next quarter, excuse me, is go through and analyze that data, maybe come up with some averages, some standard deviations, median modes, things that would give you a good look as to what the decision is. And then after that, I'm going to note any concerns about the data. Maybe I got a bad set of data because I found my data in the wrong way. Maybe I asked too conveniently. Maybe I was going to get a bunch of different juniors, but I only got one set of juniors. And then I'm going to leave a little bit of a recommendation for anyone that were to study this particular topic again. And then they would go do this again. And somebody else would come up with the idea and do it again and again and again. And then it's a collection of all these studies that leads you to a conclusion of, yeah, maybe we can address ACT scores of juniors by doing this or that. So that's the guidelines of a study. Census, measures of observations that are obtained from an entire population. Uncommon because it's very tough to get the entire population, plus it can become very expensive. A sample is a measurement or observation obtained by getting part of the population, and we talked about this last section, different ways to go about getting that sample. Our book, for the most part, deals with simple random samples. A simulation is a statistical representation that can be used to represent a dangerous real-life situation. For example, maybe you've got this new design for an airplane and you want to see how it's going to stand up to wind shear. You're obviously not going to get that plane up into the air with passengers and check out wind in an actual real-life situation. So you're going to maybe set the plane down, throw some wind through it, get some numerical data that will tell you what you're looking for as to whether or not this wing is going to hold up in really bad weather. Okay, so that's a simulation. Observational study versus experiment. When it's an observational study, you're observing, you're just looking, collecting data. Maybe I'm observing how many pickup trucks come through the parking lot. Okay? An experiment is where some sort of treatment is being applied, and I'm trying to see whether or not that treatment affected my variable that I'm measuring. Uh, Oftentimes, medical related, doesn't need to be medical related. Maybe my variable was I've got ACT scores. My treatment might be I give you an ACT type question once a week leading up to the ACT. Okay? And an experiment gets a design, or it's a designed experiment. It's set up in order to pinpoint down a cause and effect relationship. So, did my one ACT prep problem of the week affect the ACT scores in a positive or a negative way? So, cause and effect. Design experiments, you take and you're trying to measure the effect of treatment. Statistics maybe break down into two groups. You've got a treatment group and you've got a control group. Your treatment group are members that are sitting there, they're going to get the treatment applied to them, and that variable is measured. The control group gets a placebo, or basically a dummy treatment, oftentimes a sugar pill or no treatment at all, and then they're going to also measure the variable. So you're stopping that person from the whole, yeah, I took this, I feel better. Now, did I feel better because I just put an M&M into my body, placebo, or do I feel better because I actually took ibuprofen and put it in my body? Okay, so try to see if just the mental and psychological aspect helped or changed the variable. And that's basically the placebo effect. You get some sort of measurable change because, hey, I feel, therefore I feel better. It's not because of the actual medication, the actual treatment involved. It's just that, hey, by chance I took something and then I went and did something. To reduce the variable being influenced by the patient's response to a treatment, we use randomized two treatment experiment. So basically, so a patient can't take and affect the treatment as much or as often. You take the subjects, you randomly assign them from one group to the other. One group's going to receive the treatment under the study. The control group is going to get the placebo. The results are compared. Randomization is going to prevent the bias from happening, or replication, or also replication of many subjects assures changes are not caused by random chance. So in other words, don't do the two treatment experiment once, do it again and again and again. To help ensure validity, your control group limits known or unknown variables that might influence the outcome of the experiment. Try to randomization as much as possible, placing individuals into a controlled treatment group randomly rather than assigning them prevents a bias. And again, replicate, do it again and again and again. That's going to get a better chance that you pin down what's actually going on. Watch out for a lurking variable. And what a lurking variable is, an unknown variable that might cause an underlying cause for change in the measurement. So maybe a lurking variable would be that on my ACT scores, I did this treatment of giving them a weekly problem for ACT prep. They did better in their ACT scores, but they might have moved around the curriculum in Algebra 2 to teach more algebra ACT type questions. So maybe the curriculum was a lurking variable that I didn't take into account that affected those scores. Again, we've got the blind experiment is what basically we just talked about. The participants have no idea as to what's going on. The double blind is even more secretive. The people who are participating and the people administering the treatment also don't know what's going on or where the treatment's being applied. So in the first one, the nurses know who's getting the placebo, who's getting the treatment. In the second one, the nurses have no idea as well. Okay, this might stop some sort of bias from, hey, the nurse saying, I like this person, I'm going to make sure they get that treatment. Okay, so double blind is that both sides don't know. Obviously, there's going to be some sort of administrator that's watching over the study, that's keeping record as to who's getting the actual dosage of the treatment or who's getting the sugar pill. But in double blind, the nurses, at least, or the administrators, don't know. Make sure you randomize the 2 treatment experiments. Another way would be blocking. You split those individuals into different groups just by their categories. For example, if you're trying to study the effects of a weight loss program, maybe you want to block people based on weight. Somebody who's already very slender isn't going to be able to fluctuate their weight up or down, just whereas somebody who's maybe borderline getting to be obese, they're going to have the ability to fluctuate their weight more frequently. So maybe the weight loss effect in this weight range is different from the weight loss effect in that weight range. And you might get better understanding as to whether or not your treatment of your weight loss program is affecting the individuals in question. Okay, so identifying which technique would be appropriate for collecting data. We've got sampling, talked about that yesterday. We can run an experiment, we can run a simulation, or we can do a census and we can get all the data. Study the effects on calcium supplement given to young girls on bone mass. That's an experiment because you're giving some sort of treatment. That treatment right there is the calcium supplement. So because of that treatment, that makes an experiment. Study the effects of stopping cooling process on a nuclear reactor. I don't want to have an actually nuclear reactor overheat, so a simulation would be the best route there just for safety reasons. Study the amount of time college students taking a full course load spend watching TV. Okay. So we're studying the time of college students. Now, maybe experiment, but we're not really doing anything to those students. We're just kind of watching those students and asking them how much time they really watch television. If you're contacting every single college student, it would be census, but I doubt you're probably going to do that. So I think sampling might be the best way to go there. Find some way to sample and get a survey or something out of that to collect your data. Okay, speak of surveys. Survey is the art of collecting data, a response to interviews, phone conversations, internet polls, emails would be a good one, mail polls, etc. Some things to consider when you're doing a survey. Are the questions asked in a neutral way? Okay. Is the interviewer giving subtle feedback? Are the responses, are respondents answering truthfully? And is the sample a good representation of the population? Okay. We've talked about the last one a lot. Make sure your sample is a good representation of the population. So pick a good way to get a good vast majority of everything. So if my population was Cheyenne High School, try to get different samples throughout the building, not just one area. Are they answering truthfully? Maybe you ask them something that hits too close to home and they're not feeling comfortable to answer in a truthful way. Kind of like me asking, how much do you study at night? Well, if I'm the teacher, you're not going to tell me a whole lot about your study habits in a truthful manner. You're going to probably fudge them in a little ways. Is the interviewer giving subtle feedback? So, like, for example, when you answer, does that interviewer give like a neutral, smooth sounding response to the answer, or do they give you hey, that's great, I love that idea, or I can't believe you answer that way? That's completely the opposite of what we're going. So does the person who's asking the question kind of give you nonverbal feedback? That kind of goes with an answering in a neutral way. So anyways, we got this guy here. I guess I got one more here. Nonverbal responses. Okay, response cannot contact. Okay, in a different way. Voluntarily. Okay. Method maybe. So volunteer response surveys mean, hey, you go fill out the survey. Chances are you're probably not going to get anything back. And if you are going to get something back, it's going to be very skewed one way or the other. Survey results usually cannot pin down a cause and effect relationship. There's always a hidden bias, or there can be a hidden bias in the data collection There's a hidden effects on the variables, or there could be a lurking variable. There's no guarantee the results can be generalized. So I think maybe this will help out. Got a couple questions here. Just kind of sit back and look at these and see if there's anything wrong with them. A uniformed officer interviews 20 college freshmen. She asks each one his or her name and asks if they're using any illegal drugs in the last month. Okay. One possibility would be whether it's a officer or not, illegal drug use. I don't know if you're willing to like say, hey, yeah, sure, I have. Okay. Depending on maybe how the officer is presenting themselves, if they're ununiformed, not a big deal. But if they're saying, hey, I'm officer so and so, yeah, definitely not going to tell a cop, yeah, hey, I'm doing illegal drugs. Another thing that maybe go wrong with it is that, hey, their name is attached to it. Like, my name's going down with this answer. So somewhere along the way, they're going to identify my name with that answer. So a survey about food in the student cafeteria was conducted by having forms available at the cafeteria register. A drop box for completed forms were available outside the cafeteria. Okay. One, you're only surveying students who actually eat in the cafeteria. You go out for lunch, you're not going to get to those. If you're a student that brings your lunch, you're not going to get to the drop-off boxes. And if you're willing to grab one of those forms, fill it out, and then put it back into the box that's outside of the cafeteria, you're either really ecstatic, you love it, or you are so mad that you're motivated to go fill something out. Okay. On page 29, 1 through 6 are some suggested problems. I think we'll go through some of those in class. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll be available.